On Christmas Eve, 1929, just as the Great Depression was getting started, the White House burned in the most powerful fire since the War of 1812. I'm Bob Summers, and this is a presidential story. The White House, like most Washington, D.C. government buildings, has seen its fair share of fires, great and small. From kitchen fires to the largest fire of them all, the burning of the entire structure by the British in 1814.
So I am a little embarrassed, as I stand here, to think that 200 years ago, my ancestors tried to burn this place down.
In probably the second largest fire at the White House, the executive offices in the West Wing were destroyed. In 1929, on their first Christmas Eve in the White House, President and Mrs. Hoover hosted a Christmas party for the children of the president's staff in the East Wing. While listening to the Marine Band playing Christmas carols inside, outside it was looking like it would be a white Christmas, with snow on the ground and frost on the window panes. On the other side of the White House, the West Wing executive offices were quiet. Built in 1903 by President Theodore Roosevelt, the West Wing contained the president's office, which is not located in the same place as it is today, the press room, a reception room, the offices for Hoover's staff, which was only 3 people in those days, the White House switchboard, and an attic, which contained at least one copy of every government pamphlet since the time of the Theodore Roosevelt administration. There were over 200,000 pamphlets stored in that attic. M.M. Rice was the newest and youngest White House operator, so he drew the Christmas Eve shift at the switchboard. Located in the basement, the switchboard was below the offices of the president's staff. At a little past 8 p.m., Rice saw a wisp of smoke. Being a phone operator and all, Rice had easy access to a phone. He immediately called the only 2 people he knew to be in the West Wing, Secret Service agent Russell Wood and White House police officer Richard Trice. Then the operator Rice called Chief White House usher Ike Hoover, no relation to the president. Tracing the location of the smoke, Agent Wood and Patrolman Trice raced up the stairs toward the attic. When Wood opened the door to the loft, he was blasted by a wall of heat. "The whole loft is burning up," Wood shouted. He raced downstairs for a fire extinguisher, while Patrolman Trice ran to sound the alarm. As Trice descended the stairs, he flipped the main light switch. Nothing happened. The fire was inside the partitions, and the wires had burned away. After receiving Rice's call from the switchboard at the Christmas party, the chief usher, Ike Hoover, quietly entered the state dining room and urgently whispered to the president, "The executive offices are on fire. I want to take the secretaries away from the table." To which the president replied, "I'll go too." President Hoover and his aides excused themselves and headed for the West Wing. First Lady Lou Hoover was told of the fire and stayed behind to continue supervising the party. The children, unaware there was a fire at the other end of the building, continued to listen to the band and enjoy themselves. Hoover and his party crawled through a window of the president's already smoke-filled office and began removing important documents and significant artifacts. As Secret Service agents arrived from other parts of the building, they removed everyone from the room. President Hoover then went to the roof of the adjacent conservatory, donned a heavy winter coat, and lit a cigar to watch the fight against the flames. Meanwhile, Patrolman Trice sprinted to the White House fire alarm box. He broke the glass on the box, turned the handle, opened the door, and pulled the hook. The first alarm was sounded at 8:09 p.m. As alarms chimed in all Washington firehouses, the 1927 Seagrave pumper of Engine 1 roared through the front gates of the White House. Captain Edward O'Connor would immediately see the fire behind the small attic windows of the West Wing, as could Battalion Chief C.W. Gill. At first they thought the fire was contained, but they soon spotted flames beyond the initial fire zone. Chief Gill led the hosesmen inside the smoke-filled building. Amid the heat and fumes, Gill called for Rescue Squad 1. In those days, the only firemen with smoke helmets, also known as respirator masks. As Chief Gill and his men climbed the attic stairs, a sudden rush of hot gas and a fireball of flame whooshed through the stairwell. This backdraft blew Gill and most of his crew back down to the main floor. 4 of the men from Engine 1 were injured. Chief Gill immediately called for a second alarm. Then they called for the water and proceeded back up the stairs. The time was 8:15. Engines 16 and 23 were the next to arrive at the scene. When they arrived at the rear of the White House, they were met with a large locked iron gate. Not a problem, as they had foreseen this problem earlier. All the fire captains who would be White House first responders were given keys to the gate. But there was a problem. The Secret Service had changed the locks and forgotten to inform the fire department. After waiting in the street, White House policemen finally arrived with the key to let them in. Chief George Watson, who had arrived from his house, then deployed the arriving fire companies, but he could also see flames bursting through the roof and skylights. He knew more help was needed, so he sounded another alarm. In total, this 4-alarm fire called in 19 engine companies, 4 truck companies, and 130 firefighters. 2/3 of the department were concentrated around Lafayette Square. Some of the pumpers were collecting their water from hydrants 5 blocks away. Reserve equipment was activated by off-duty firefighters. The firefighters tried to fight the fire by shooting streams of water from the roof into the skylights. They soon learned that most of the skylights led to air shafts that went all the way down to the main floor. So, not much water was making it to the fire source in the attic, but it did go everywhere else. White House reporters, braving the smoke, waded into ankle-high water to salvage files in the press room, in addition to their new Webster's Dictionary and stand that they had all chipped in to buy. Another floor down, switchboard operator M.M. Rice was still on the job, with icy water up to his knees. When Rice's boss showed up, he had to order Rice to leave immediately. 6 firemen were working in the president's office trying to save it, when the ceiling, weakened by water and fire, crashed down on them. Amazingly, 4 were unhurt. The other 2 were injured when the crystal chandelier landed on them. Outside was no better, as the streets, walls, and even the firefighters themselves were coated with ice as the water immediately froze. But the cold weather did not keep away the onlookers. As word of the fire spread, so many people had gathered that 150 Army soldiers and 100 police officers had to form a human wall around the White House grounds. Even that didn't stop some from trying to get a closer look by masquerading as high government officials. One government official who was very interested in the fire was the grandson of a former occupant, Ulysses S. Grant. Lieutenant Colonel Ulysses S. Grant III worked for the newly created Office of Public Buildings and Public Parks of the National Capital, and was in charge of D.C.'s public buildings and public works. Grant left his Christmas Eve table and spent most of the night at the fire, mainly making arrangements for President Hoover's new office. Eventually, Grant dislodged some high-ranking Army staff in the State, War, and Navy building across the street for the presidential staff. President Hoover personally parked himself in the office of retired General of the Army's John J. Pershing. At about 10 p.m., the children's Christmas party ended. Then the First Lady and her sister joined the president, who was still puffing on a cigar and watching the diminishing blaze. By 10:30, the flames were doused. At 7:27 a.m. on Christmas morning, the fire was officially declared out, although Engine 1 stayed behind during the day to extinguish any flare-ups. In all, 15 firefighters were injured. The cause of the fire was investigated and determined to be either a blocked chimney vent or overheated faulty electrical wiring, which caused the pamphlets in the attic to ignite. The executive offices were heavily damaged by water, smoke, and fire, and the press room was ruined. The White House, like all government buildings even today, is self-insured. Without insurance, officials needed to ask Congress for a special appropriation to repair the $135,000 in damage, or about $2.4 million today. The West Wing was unavailable for 4 months while repairs were made. It opened again on April 14, 1930. The next day, President Hoover held a press conference and told the reporters, "This is a small assembly this morning, and I have small news. In fact, none at all. I will just welcome you back to the new White House. You will be more comfortable, and so will I." Some of the children who attended the Christmas party in 1929 were invited back the next year. As a gift, the children received toy fire engines made by the Kenton Toy Manufacturing Company of Kenton, Ohio, a popular creator of cast-iron toys. Mrs. Hoover personally told the children the fire engines were in memory of the fire the previous year. One thing that was corrected immediately: the Secret Service delivered the correct White House gate keys to the captains of the Washington Fire Department. Thanks for watching. If this video made you warm for the holidays, please help out the channel, like and subscribe. And please ride your sleigh over to POTUS.com to learn more interesting facts about the presidents.